Well, the mainstream media is going pretty hard and heavy at Danielle Smith, trying to stir up a bunch of drama that people will get polarized along while they demand that Canadians follow behind Mark Carney. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name's Sterling. Premier Smith and the Alberta government are trying to put forward legislation that would allow people to have citizens' initiatives put onto the ballot. We don't do it that often in Canada. They do it all the time in the American, like in the United States. They had during the last election, there was all kinds of states where there was not only which president did you want to vote for, Harris or Trump, but did you agree with this proposition, this proposition, this proposition, where people wanted to have different ideas, whatever they were. I mean, it would vary from state to state, but let's just say they wanted to make it so that we would rename a road such and such, or we wanted to ban all petrochemical cars, or we wanted to ban all electric cars. And then they put these propositions on the ballot so that when you're casting your vote, you can also vote for this initiative or proposition, depending on which side you're looking at it from. And I think that Canada should absolutely have that. For example, you could have voted for Mark Carney, but voted against net zero. You could have voted for Pierre Poilievre, but voted against any of the ideas that he had, right? So, like, you could have voted against tougher laws, let's say, for the sake of argument. And I believe that this is something that should be on every ballot. If the jurisdiction is provincial, then there should be questions put forward on that. And the Alberta government has a provincial election coming up in 2 years. So they're saying, let's make sure that we can get tickets on the ballot. Of course, the media is trying to make you think that the whole place is burning down because they're hysterical. They're just hysterical. They're not media. It's the worst kind of drama queens in the history of mankind, running up and down our most prestigious political buildings, screaming at the top of their lungs that the sky's falling, the sky's falling, doing their best to try to make people, not the people in the room, because the people in the room see right through them, but the people that might be foolish enough to read their TikTok post, to lose their minds. And of course, it's no different. You know, Danielle Smith comes up there and she says, you know, we have a problem with net zero. We have a problem with Mark Carney's approach to the way that Albertans are going to be freezing to death throughout the winter. And you would think that they would be talking about that. No. They wanted to talk about separation. Yeah, that's really responsible journalism, isn't it?
Hi, this is a question for the Premier, Julia Wong, CBC National. There was a letter sent to yourself and one also sent to the Prime Minister from the Chief of Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation and the Chief of the Mikisew Cree First Nation. They say that you're attempting to manufacture a national unity crisis by enabling a referendum on separatism. My question to you is, what will your government do to ensure any referendums respect and do not breach Treaties 6, 7, and 8?
Well, first, let me say that we respect all of the treaty rights that are enshrined in the Constitution under Section 35. And the Citizen Initiative Act is not new legislation, and it was never designed to, nor does it breach treaty agreements. The Citizen Initiative Act, I think, is the purest form of democracy we have, and it gives all Albertans an opportunity to play a direct role in the democratic process by inviting them to have a direct say on issues their fellow citizens want to put to the people. Any Albertan can put an idea forward on any topic, and if they're able to get the number of signatures, then it would go to a vote, and that includes a vote of members of First Nations, and we encourage Indigenous peoples to participate in the process.
This was the first question for Danielle Smith, right? It hadn't have anything to do with the lawsuit. It didn't have anything to do with them taking the Carney government to court. It didn't have anything to do with net zero and how the policies of the far left are trying to freeze people in Alberta to death. No, they wanted to try and stir up trouble between Alberta and the Cree First Nations, who wrote a letter to two different people, and somehow the press got a hold of it, which is a bit strange in my mind, that all of a sudden they would get this letter in the hands of the CBC, miraculously. And the CBC tries to make it all about somehow, if Alberta doesn't like the way that Ottawa is handling things, Ottawa, the Liberal government, who is routinely accused of not caring what happens to the First Nations over and over and over again. Somehow now, if Alberta goes against Mark Carney, they're going against Treaty 6, 7, and 8. I mean, that's just the most ridiculous. That's how far stretched they have this, right? That's how bad they're willing to go to try to get people to pay attention to them, to try to drive a wedge. I mean, I don't want to hear anything from the CBC until they go and ask the Bloc Québécois about why they're trying to destroy the union, why they're trying to initiate a unity crisis. Not only that, but the provincial government of Quebec is a separatist government. So we have a provincial parliament that is quite literally trying to separate and destroy the country of Canada, as well as 23 people from that very same province in the halls of the House of Commons trying to destroy the country of Canada. And the press is asking Danielle Smith while she's trying to allow people to put a question, any question they want, on the ballot. I think it's time that we started to see about how we can make the CBC realize that they have to cater to every side of the coin, not just their own lunacy, not just their own activism. That there are at least 42% of the country who believes that they are on the conservative side of the aisle, and therefore 42% of the handouts that the CBC receives comes from people who are on the other side of the aisle. Therefore, 42% of the content should be toward people who are on the other side of the aisle. Otherwise, you're asking me to pay for a service that does not benefit me. In fact, you're asking me to support a service that targets me. I don't think that's constitutional in any country.
My follow-up is, and I know that you said that you want a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, and I see that you're saying that this would be the purest form of democracy, but you've also lowered the threshold for any referendum to happen, which we know will very much probably include a referendum on Alberta separatism. Are you risking the province's relationship with Indigenous people to appease a vocal minority who want to separate from Canada?
The changes that are proposed in the Elections Act, I had put in the minister's mandate letter when I first signed off on it in 2023. And it was in looking at the way in which propositions are put forward around the world, in particular California, which seems to have the most successful opportunity for citizens to engage in the process. They have anywhere from 5 to 10 propositions every year, but their measures are actually quite a bit lower than ours. It's 5% for a statutory change based on the previous level of vote for the governor, and 8% for constitutional changes. So actually ours is still higher than what we see in other jurisdictions. It needs to be high, but it also needs to be achievable, and that's what we're trying to achieve with this balance.
Well, I, for one, wish this reporter would make up her mind. Is it that she's trying to start trouble with the government so that it will impact the First Nations, or is it a vocal minority? Because there are only 23 separatists in the House of Commons, which makes them a very vocal minority, and I don't hear any of the reporters go into them and saying, how come it is, Mark Carney, that you're willing to cater to a small minority of separatists who want to destroy Canada? And this, of course, is why we need a fair and balanced media in this country, so that we wouldn't have these ridiculous people asking questions of high-ranking politicians over nothing, while all the while their very same question could have been framed perfectly the exact same to the individual who was actually perpetrating what they describe, right? Why are they not asking the Bloc about separation? We don't hear about any of that when we talk to the mainstream media. Is that because they love Radio Canada, or is it just because that they are bought and paid for and that they're only looking to start up trouble and drama? Are they looking to not be so much journalists as they are tabloid writers? And if you're in journalism, you know exactly what I mean when I say that you're a tabloid journalist, like this individual who was asking the question.
Hi, sorry, Premier, it kind of feels like you're being disingenuous here. You're not acknowledging what your party president said. You're not acknowledging that there are people gathering outside the legislature today calling for a separation referendum. You're not acknowledging that there are many groups of people in this province who read your proposed legislation as an open door, as an invitation to bring this referendum forward. I mean, do you acknowledge that this has opened the door for them to get it? This is fanning the flames of the fire.
Well,
do you acknowledge that?
I can read the media just as you can, and I can read the polls just as you can. And Angus Reid did a poll a couple of weeks ago that said that there was independence support of 25% of Albertans and higher, I think 33% of Saskatchewan residents. That seems to me that the majority of people are not in favor of that. And so I guess we'll see whether or not they're able to put together a petition gather enough signatures and put it to the people. I think you're kind of jumping ahead a few steps. We have initiative legislation that has been in the works from my minister since I wrote his mandate letter in 2023, when this was not an active conversation. This legislation came forward now because we have a whole pile of rules that we need to change, because we have to start preparing for a provincial election in 2027. So this is just part of the process. And we had heard from the public on both our recall legislation and our citizen initiative that the bars were set too high, and they wanted us to bring them down so that certain questions could be achieved through a petition campaign at a more reasonable level. We looked around the world. We looked at California, which I think is really the hallmark of this type of legislation, and we brought our amounts down to align with that.
Let's establish right out of the gate that Danielle Smith handled that like a consummate pro. That she said, well, I think you're jumping ahead of the game. I believe that if there are only 33% of the population or 25% of the population, then it's not in a majority at all, and you really have nothing to worry about. I do, however, want to take issue with the dramatic tabloid journalist who was trying to say that there's fanning the flames of the fire and that there's many people. So if on the one hand there's many people, that means that it's not Danielle Smith. It means that there's many people. If, on the other hand, you feel that giving them an opportunity to vote on the issue is somehow fanning the flames of the fire, well, appreciate how I feel allowing 23 people who are fully fledged, out loud, trying to separate from Canada, destroy the country. And they are not only fanning the flames of the fire, they are lighting the fire. They're pouring gasoline all over the fire. And you haven't asked them a single question about separation ever. Makes it a little bit hard to think that you're being sincere when we look at it through that light. When we consider that many of each of those 23 bloc members would have been elected by many thousands of people, indicating that they represent many thousands of people in this country who want to separate from Canada, who want to destroy the country and have their own country. Now, I get that there's a lot of issues and concerns and problems around that, but they have 2 times already tried, right? I mean, the last time being Meech Lake. You should Google the Meech Lake Accords and you might understand what they're up against, even by having the mandate in Alberta. Of course, what she's leaving out, the reporter, is that you could put any question on there. I want to make Alberta change its flag. You could put that on the proposition if you can get enough people. I want in Alberta Saturday to be Candy Cane Day, and you could put that on there if you can get 177,000 people to agree with you or to support you with their signature. The reporter's looking to stir up trouble. Like any tabloid journalist, she's not willing to look at the facts. She's only willing to look at what she wants it to believe. I mean, she would be better off in writing stories, say, for comic books or maybe for Disney, than trying to consider herself a journalist. Nonetheless, I think that it's important to see how professionally and absolutely perfectly Premier Smith handled such hostility and aggression and coming from a person who's willing to twist her words left, right, and center. Because Danielle Smith didn't take responsibility for something that the party president said. Like, how is it that you feel that she should be responsible for the words of other people? That's just the most absurd concept. You're moving the lines of responsibility so far, and yet you're not looking at the Quebecois at all. You're not looking at the Bloc. You're not looking at Mark Carney. You're not even talking about the net zero problems that are really driving any talk of separation from the Western Canada. You're not even talking about how it's the net zero that is spurring it on. This is very irresponsible, and you can expect nothing left from people who believe that they're activists, from people who believe that, they can take a creative writing course and all of a sudden consider themselves to be Pulitzer Prize winning journalists. Many of you might believe that I'm being harsh on the 2 reporters, but I don't believe that I am. I believe that I'm having standards that they are not meeting. I believe that there is journalism and then there's what they're doing. I believe that if you're truly looking for the truth, you should look for the truth without having your opinion cloud that question, without having the motivation that you're being paid to destroy or derail cloud that question. The fact that you need to have more concerns about whether or not you can get somebody on Instagram to like your post rather than to tell yourself that you've written something that people find to have integrity. Well, that really is why you should go back to your apartment right now and reevaluate your entire approach to journalism. And I know that people don't want to hear it. They've been coddled now for 15 years, and that they think that by being told that they're not being professional, somehow I'm the one that's the wrong one. But I don't agree with their behavior. I don't agree with their approach. I believe that if you're going to be talking to anybody about separatism, it should be the Premier of Quebec. It should be the leader of the Bloc Québécois who sits in the House of Commons, not outside with picket signs and asking people for signatures. He actually goes into the building, gets called a member of parliament, gets called honorable. And you're in here now trying to stir up trouble between the province of Alberta, the First Nations, leaving Mark Carney right out of it. And I go back to what I said earlier. You really should be taking 40% of your question and ensuring that 40% of the population of Canada has their angle also covered. See, that's what it means to be impartial. That you only cover one side or the other is partiality. When you're in the middle, when you're just the facts, just trying to report news as it is, just the truth of the matter, not your opinion, but the facts as they are, then you are easy to cover both sides. Then you will find that people will listen to you. Of course, you're not going to be able to do that because that would mean changing the entire framework of your mind. But I suppose that's a question for a different video. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.